Dragon Age 2 was rated M for mature by the ESRB and contains blood and gore, language, sexual content, and violence. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello everyone, my name is Amaronith and I play games for the internet, and today we're playing Dragon Age 2. We've gone through quite a bit of, not really that much at all of the game, but I figured it was time that we did some Codex readings. 'Cause, oh boy. Golly, and I don't even know what to leave out and what not to. So we're just gonna read through everything and yeah. Starting with creatures. Abomination. We arrived in the dead of night. We had been tracking the Maleficar for days, and finally had him cornered. Or so we thought. As we approached, a home on the edge of the town exploded, sending splinters of wood and fist-sized chunks of rocks into our ranks. We had but moments to regroup before fire rained from the sky. The sounds of destruction wrapped in a hideous laughter from the center of the village. There, perched atop the spire of the village chantry, stood the mage, but he was human no longer. We shouted prayers to the Maker and deflected what magic we could, but as we fought, the creature fought harder. I saw my comrades fall, burned by the flaming sky or crushed by debris, the monstrous creature looking as if a demon were wearing a man like a twisted suit of skin, spotted me and grinned. We had forced it to this, I realized. The mage had made this pact, given himself over to the demon to survive our assault. Transcribed from a tale told by a former Templar in Cumberland, 884 Blessed. It is known that mages are able to walk the Fade while completely aware of their surroundings, unlike most others who may only enter the realm as dreamers and leave it scarcely aware of their experience. Demons are drawn to mages, though whether it is because of this awareness or simply by virtue of their magical power in our world is unknown. Regardless of the reasons, a demon always attempts to possess a mage when it encounters one, by force or by making some kind of deal, depending on the strength of the mage. Should the demon get the upper hand, the result is an unholy union known as an abomination. Abominations have been responsible for some of the worst cataclysms in history, and the notion that some mage in a remote tower could turn into such a creature unbeknownst to any was the driving force behind the creation of the Circle of Magi. Thankfully, abominations are rare. The Circle has methods for weeding out those who are too at risk for demonic possession, and scant few mages would give up their free will to submit to such a bond with a demon. But once an abomination is created, it will do its best to create more. Considering that entire squads of Templars have been known to fall at the hands of a single abomination, it is not surprising that the Chantry takes the business of the Circle of Magi very seriously indeed. Arcane Horror. Upon ascending to the second floor of the tower, we were greeted by a gruesome sight, a ragged collection of bones wearing the robes of one of the senior enchanters. I had known her for years, watched her raise countless apprentices, and now she was a mere puppet for some demon. Transcribed from a tale told by a Templar in Antiva City, 713 Storm. Demons, of course, have no form in our world. When they enter, either where the veil is particularly thin or through blood magic summoning, they must take possession of a body. When a pride demon takes control of the corpse of a mage, an arcane horror is born. Although they appear to be little more than bones, these are fierce creatures, possessing not only all the spellcasting abilities of a living mage, but also the capacity to heal and even command other animated corpses. Corpse. To anyone who doubts the wickedness of blood magic, I say, with your own hands, strike down the corpses of your own brothers who have fallen in battle to a Maleficar. Then we may discuss morality. Knight Commander Benedictus, in a letter to the Divine, 546 Exalted. The walking dead are not, as the superstitious are want to believe, the living come back for revenge. They are, rather, corpses possessed by demons. The shambling corpse, controlled by a demon of sloth, causes its enemies to become weak and fatigued. Corpses possessed by rage demons go berserk and simply wade into their opponents mindlessly. Devouring corpses are held by hunger demons and feed upon the living. The more powerful demons rarely deign to possess a dead host. Desire Demon. In all my studies, I must say the most intriguing was my interview with the Desire Demon. That the creature was willing to speak with me was a sign that this was no mere monster, mindlessly driven by its nature, but rather a rational being as interested in me as I was in it. It took a form that I would call female, though I had no doubt that it could appear otherwise. I wondered if it had appeared as it did because I wanted it to, or because I expected it to. She, and indeed I could only think of her as such now, smiled warmly at me, and laughed a musical sound that seemed to thrill my old heart. So frightened was I of this creature's legendary abilities to twist the hearts of men, and so relieved was I when I looked across the table into her dark eyes. This was a fearsome creature of the Fade, but as I spoke with her, I slowly came to realize that this demon was merely as misunderstood as we mages are ourselves. From the journal of former senior enchanter Malleus, once of the Circle of Ravane, declared apostate in 920 Dragon. Of all the threats from beyond the veil, few are more insidious and deceptively deadly than the Desire Demon. In folklore, such demons are characterized as peddlers of lust, luring their prey into a sexual encounter only to be slain at the culmination. While a Desire Demon can indeed deal in pleasure, in truth they deal with any manner of desire that humans can possess. Wealth, power, and beauty, to name a few. Far more intelligent than the bestial hunger and rage demons, and far more ambitious than the demons of sloth, these dark spirits are amongst the most skilled at tempting mages into possession. Many who serve the whims of a Desire Demon never realize it. They are manipulated by illusions and deceit, if not outright mind control, although these demons are reluctant to resort to such crude measures. Indeed, they seem to take great pleasure in corruption. The greater the deceit, the greater their victory. Only demons of pride prove more fearsome opponents when roused. Their abilities to affect the mind allow them to assume disguises and even alter the environment to their purposes, not to mention the great strength and speed they possess if they should have to resort to more physical means. Most often, a Desire Demon will attempt to bargain its way to freedom, if overpowered. Many stories exist that depict mages defeating Desire Demons to the point where a wish can be wrested from them. It should be noted that in such stories, the demon almost always gets the upper hand, even when the mage thinks his wish has been granted. Hurlock. Taller than their Genlock cousins, the Hurlocks are roughly of human size, but are possessed of considerable strength and constitution. The shock troop of the Darkspawn, a single berserking Hurlock, can often be a match for numerous opponents at once. They are known to adorn themselves with roughly carved tattoos to keep track of their kills and deeds, though it is unknown whether or not there is a uniform standard to these markings. Mabari War Hound. Dogs are an essential part of Ferelden culture, and no dog is more prized than the Mabari. The breed is as old as myth, said to have been bred from the wolves who served Dane. Prized for their intelligence and loyalty, these dogs are more than mere weapons or status symbols. The hounds choose their masters and pair with them for life. To be the master of a Mabari anywhere in Ferelden is to be recognized instantly as a person of worth. The Mabari is an essential part of Ferelden military strategy. Trained hounds can easily pull knights from horseback or break lines of pikemen, and the sight and sound of a wave of war dogs howling and snarling has been known to cause panic among even the most hardened infantry soldiers. Ogre. Towering over their darkspawn kin, the massive ogres are a rare sight on the battlefield. Traditionally, they only appear during a blight, but some records claim that ogres have been spotted in the deep roads hunting alone or in small groups. At least one report by the Grey Wardens claimed that an ogre was spotted alone in the Korcari Wilds in 919 Dragon. though it was weakened and easily dispatched. Up to 100 of these creatures can accompany a darkspawn horde at any one time during a blight, often using their great strength to burst through fortifications and demolish the front lines of the opposing army. They use brute force to charge their enemies like bulls, slam the ground with their fists to shake enemies off their feet, and hurl giant rocks into the face of oncoming foes. Melee can be difficult against a giant that snatches a warrior up in one hand, crushing the life out of him or beating him into oblivion with the other hand. The nimble can try to wriggle his way free, or an ally can attempt an array of stunning blows on an ogre to free the comrade in danger. Grey Warden lore urges caution when slaying an ogre. Unless it is ensured that they have received a major wound to the head or the heart, it is possible that they are lying dormant and will regenerate to full health within a matter of minutes. During a blight, most Grey Wardens recommend burning all darkspawn to ashes, dead ogres in particular. Rage Demon. Encountered in the Fade, the true form of a rage demon is a frightening sight, a thing of pure fire, its body seemingly made of amorphous lava and its eyes two pinpricks of baleful light radiating from its core. The abilities of such a demon center on the fire it generates. It burns those who come near, and the most powerful of its kind are able to lash out with bolts of fire and even firestorms that can affect entire areas. Fortunately, even powerful rage demons are less intelligent than most other varieties. Their tactics are simple: attack an enemy on sight with as much force as possible until it perishes. Some rage demons carry over their heat-based abilities into possessed hosts, but otherwise the true form is mostly seen outside of the Fade, when it's specifically summoned by a mage to do his bidding. Revenant. An entire unit of men, all slain by one creature. I didn't believe it at first, your perfection, but it appears that this is so. We have a survivor, and while at first I thought his rantings pure exaggeration, it appears to be no simple skeleton. The descriptions of the creature's abilities are eerily similar to those of our brothers at Marnus Pell encountered almost a century ago. Men pulled through the air to skewer themselves on the creature's blade, and attacked so quick that it was able to assault multiple opponents at once. No, your perfection, what we have here is indeed a revenant, and nothing less. From a letter to Divine Amara III, 571, Exalted. Revenant is a corpse possessed by a demon of pride or of desire, making it amongst the most powerful possessed opponents that one can face. Many possess spells, but most are armed and armored and prefer the use of their martial talents. They are weak against physical attacks, but regenerate quickly, and commonly use telekinesis to pull opponents into melee range should they try to flee. Revenants also have the ability to strike multiple opponents surrounding them. Stay at range if possible and strike quickly. That is the only way to take such a creature down. Shade. It has often been suggested that the only way for a demon to affect the world of the living is by possessing a living or once living body. But this is not always true. Indeed, a shade is one such creature, a demon in its true form that has adapted to affect the world around it. My hypothesis is this: we already know that many demons become confused when they pass through the veil and into our world. They are unable to tell the living from the dead, the very static nature of our universe being confusing to a creature that is accustomed to a physicality determined entirely by emotion and memory. Most demons seek to immediately seize upon anything they perceive as life, jealously attempting to possess it. But what of those that do not? What of those that encounter no life, or fail to possess a body? What of those that are more cautious by their nature? These demons watch. They lurk. They envy. In time, such a demon will learn to drain energy from the psyche of those it encounters, just as it did in the Fade. Once it is drained enough, it has the power to manifest and will forever be known as a shade. Such a creature spurns possession. It instead floats as a shadow across its piece of land, preying upon the psyche of any who cross its path. Perhaps it believes itself still in the Fade? There is evidence to believe this is so. A shade will weaken the living by its very proximity. If it forces its will, it can drain a single target very quickly. Some have even been known to assault the minds of a living victim, causing confusion or horror and making the target ripe for the kill. The tragedy of a shade is perhaps that, once it has drained a target whole, its appetite is only heightened rather than slaked. From the journal of former senior enchanter Malleus, once of the Circle of Ravane, declared apostate in 920 Dragon Age. Giant Spider. Giant spiders tend to appear in old ruins and other places where the veil has become thin because of magical disturbances or a great number of deaths. In such places, spirits and demons pass into the world of the living and attempt to take control over living beings, spiders among them. Not all scholars accept this explanation for the presence of these beasts, however. Some claim that the thinning veil allows magic to leak from the Fade, tainting such creatures as these spiders to transform into larger and more potent creatures than they would ever become naturally. While such spiders are known to possess powerful poisons and the ability to fling webs at opponents in combat, studies of them have been few and the full range of their abilities are unknown. Items. The Last Descent. The Legion of the Dead are comprised of dwarves who are looking to regain their honor. These discredited dwarves must venture into the deep roads to battle an endless tide of darkspawn. The Legion guarantees redemption for its members, but so too their deaths. These are records indicating that one human joined the Legion. Sir Aurelian Pentagast, the defeated contender for the Navaran throne, retreated into the Dwarven lands in 860 Blessed. Sir Aurelian was a pious man who was ousted after clashing with his people. He believed the Maker demanded that he return his homeland to Chantry rule. With little recourse but to live out his days as a dishonored exile, he joined the Legion of the Dead and went into the deep roads as a dwarven hero. He was never seen again, but pieces of his enchanted armor have turned up on the surface in the ensuing decades. Some say the armor was scavenged off his body, others that he sold the pieces after secretly returning to the surface. The truth, as always, is known only to the Legion, whose motto has always been, "Our secrets die with us." From Legacy of Orzammar by Alistad the Sage, 905 Dragon. The Long Trek. Malcolm would never tell his wife or young children where he was from. It was a bloody tale that forever gave him nightmares. When their love was still fresh, Leandra once pressed him on the subject. All he would say is, Freedom's price is never cheap, but that was 100 leagues and a lifetime ago. His haunted gaze lingered on his favorite boots, and he would say no more. The Fugitive's Mantle. Malcolm Hawke ranged the breadth of the Free Marches as he ran from the Templars who pursued him. He often posed as a mercenary, and his substantial martial skills easily secured him positions in different bands. On one assignment for the Crimson Oars, he was sent to Kirkwall, the seat of Templar power in the region. He had every intention of staying there briefly, but fate had other plans. Malcolm's Bequest. In Kirkwall, Malcolm met Leandra, and despite all common sense, courted her. The few times Leandra managed to slip away from her family, Malcolm showed her the whole world, something completely different from her cloistered existence. It was dangerous, forbidden, and she quickly fell madly in love with the dashing Malcolm Hawke. These stolen moments would end all too soon. One day, while fighting the Carta on the docks, Malcolm used magic to save the life of the Crimson Oars leader. The Kirkwall Templars were alerted, but Malcolm wouldn't flee the city without seeing his love one last time. He devised to meet her at the masked ball for the visiting Orlesian Empress. Disguised in Orlesian robes, Malcolm slipped past the Templars to dance with his love. At the end of the night, Leandra would not hear his goodbye and chanced at happiness rather than face her gray, prearranged future. Malcolm and Leandra ran into the night and never looked back. Malcolm's Honor. Malcolm and Leandra fled across the waking sea to a new life away from the cold shadow of the gallows. It took some doing, but the vastness of Ferelden allowed them to fall beneath the notice of their Templar pursuers. They settled in the small village of Lothering, where a Malcolm made every effort to ensure that his children didn't fear magic, and were well insulated against those who did. Malcolm had picked up a trick or two here and there, and this deceptively simple staff shows the breadth of his knowledge. More an ongoing project than a specialist's tool, it is the handiwork of someone comfortable with the life he must live, for as long as he was granted the opportunity to live it. That's really romantic, isn't it? Malcolm and Leandra's story. I'd read that romance novel. Aldenon's Vestments. To all appearances, he was a hedge wizard hailing from the Frostbacks, perhaps Alamari, but from the wild lands if so. Venerable, certainly worthy of respect, but not commanding it. When he stormed into my master's feast hall and offered his service in a resounding voice, there was laughter at his audacity. Several bondsmen offered to remove the miscreant, but before they could grab him, the mage lifted his staff and the bondsmen fell to the ground. Each time they stood, they slipped again, and their antics were met with laughter. Arl Tenedor the Elder, who was not long for this world, demanded to know who this arrogant invader was. "I am the beginning of the end. I am Luckbinder, Spellweaver, and the Keeper of Secrets. And I am here to build a kingdom. I am Aldenon the Wise, and if you haven't heard of me yet, never can you say the same again," his voice boomed, silencing all. His magic was potent, and the hall gave him a wary look. Tenedor accepted him as his advisor that day. Then, when Tenedor the Younger rose to his father's seat, he took Aldenon into service as well. I sat with the mage in many councils, and although his magecraft was greater than even the Tevinter magisters, many believed his advice to be folly. He had little appreciation for the hard truths of our land, they said. Compassion, mercy, justice, they matter not when turned Simeon invades your land, subverts your nobles, and takes what's yours. He grew bitter and impatient with us and ours, and these sentiments were often returned. But others could see he had a vision of something better than the endless petty wars of Tyrns and Arls. When Arl Mirrodin besieged us, a youth named Calenhad was sent to meet the Asp, but all expected a treacherous end. Yet the boy returned to great acclaim, and announced there would be no terms. Aldenon was taken with the foolhardy honor the boy displayed, and seemed to awaken as from a dark dream. The mage told Tenedor the Younger he would lend his aid for this battle, but after that he would serve another. Tenedor accepted his resignation with relief more than anything. By the end of the siege of the Western Hill, Arl Tenedor was no more. It was Calenhad who defeated Mirrodin in single combat, and he became Tyrn Calenhad. Aldenon was named his chief advisor. From the Recollections of Sir Deveth, Banner Knight of King Calenhad. Freedom's Promise. As Calenhad grew into a man, one great contentious issue separated him from Aldenon, Calenhad's faith. As biddable as Calenhad was on some topics, never would he back down from matters of honor or Andraste. What Aldenon believed, only Aldenon knew, but he most certainly did not believe in the Maker. The friends' arguments grew only hotter as the years passed. But that aside, the union of Calenhad's peerless honor and Aldenon's ingenuity overcame every obstacle set before them. Rivals turned into friends, treacheries were uncovered, and impossible battles won. But as we turned to Tyrn Simeon, no one rested easy. Tyrn Simeon's host outnumbered us many times over. He controlled the holy city of Denerim. Many great and terrible warriors had sworn him fealty. Aldenon conceived a plan to enlist strong allies, and Calenhad went into the Brazilian forest to make it so. But unbeknownst to the mage, Calenhad had made contact with the Chantry. When Calenhad returned at the head of the Ash Warriors, as Aldenon expected, so did Templars and Circle Mages join our host. Aldenon was in a fury such as I've never seen. He wanted a kingdom of free men, of moral people beholden to law. where a common man could tend his land safely and in peace. He lifted his staff, and his voice echoed through the hills. A civilization cannot be civil if it condones the slavery of another. And that is what this circle is. But by accident of birth, those mages would be free to live, love, and die as they choose. The circles will break, if it be 1 year, a decade, a century, or beyond. Tyrants always fall, and the downtrodden always strive for freedom. Then Aldenon left, and although Lady Shayna slew Simeon that day, and Calenhad ruled a united kingdom, my liege was not the same without his mentor and friend. We live in the kingdom built on the dreams of 2 great friends, and we are all lessened by Aldenon's departure. From the recollections of Sir Devith, Banner Knight of King Calenhad. Robes of the Pretender. As the chantry's hold on the kingdom grew and Aldenon's rebel mages were claimed one by one, the great Calenhad came to regret letting the circle form in his kingdom. Certainly he missed his old friend's counsel, and then Calenhad disappeared, leaving crown and kingdom to his unborn son. One story says he tracked down Martirel the Elusive, the only one of Aldenon's apprentices ever captured. Calenhad managed what the Templars could not, and found the mage. He asked Martirel where Aldenon had fled to, but Martirel refused him. The next night the king asked again, and was again refused. So he began to tell Martirel his whole life story. After a full week the king reached the end of his tale, and Martirel heard the regret in the king's word. So the mage broke his solemn vow, and told Calenhad where his old master had gone. Calenhad thanked him, and left to find his truest friend. Whether Calenhad ever found Aldenon is what they said, and whether they made amends, only the Maker knows, but that's the last anyone ever saw our king. From a story told and retold many times by apprentices in the Encircled Tower of Ferelden. Wisdom's Eye. Although his vestments are legendary, Aldenon also weaved many subtle and potent enchantments into his cap during the years he fought against the Circled Tower of Ferelden. He claimed he could use Wisdom's Eye to even see the future. Certainly, the innumerable times that he and other rebel mages escaped Templars lend some credence to the claim. When Aldenon's band numbered fewer than the fingers of one hand, he donned his hat and meditated a full day. When he awoke, he said the Maker and the Circle had won, and he bade his apprentices run. He was never heard from again. Air of Confidence. After averting a disaster at the Circle of Markham, Evra was given this ring as first enchanter. Was given this ring by the first enchanter. Although the Air of Confidence is not as eye-catching as his other famous ring, it is said that Evra always wore it, even when sleeping. The exact magical properties of the Air of Confidence are a subject of much speculation among minstrels. Pardon me. Amulet of Ashes. A ruined piece of charred wood hangs from its setting of half-melted gold. Holding it over open flame, however, reveals its powers. In the flickering flames, the gold recedes into some former shape, while the wood turns brown and reveals its grain. Blood Dragon Armor. Commissioned by an infamous Navarran dragon hunter, this armor was crafted in a time when dragons had almost been hunted to extinction, and fused with the beast's blood, and the armor gained notoriety after the hunter died at the hands of men rather than the dragons it was designed to protect him from. The Far Cliffs of Kirkwall. Written by a Ferelden refugee as she fled the Blight, this book of poems describes her dreams of the start of a new start in Kirkwall, the city across the sea. Readers will surely be enriched by her insights. Hayder's Razor. In Kirkwall's seedier quarters, fortunes had been built on the slave trade. This ancient dwarven blade undoubtedly commanded a high price, but Hayder could clearly afford it. Who says crime doesn't pay? Dura's Blue Flame. This weathered silver amulet has passed through many hands over the years. A deep blue sapphire almost glows in a certain light. Although the time has faded its intricate engravings, the amulet has a certain majesty about it. Evra's trophy belt. This grisly belt is filled with monstrous teeth, chipped blades, scraps of fur, and armor fragments. Each piece is said to be a trophy collected by Evra during his many adventures. Evra's might. When Evra gained notoriety by defeating the Blood Sisters of Venstel, he was wearing his signature ring. Although the massive size of the solid gold ring attracts attention, it served a more practical purpose for Evra. He used it to punch demons in the face, sometimes felling them in a single blow. Fadeshear. The core of this blade is old as the first smiths who sought a way to battle the nightmare from the land beyond. It has fought the demonic hosts in countless battles. Sometimes it has been held high in triumphant victory, other times it has lain broken beside its dying owner. But after every defeat it has always been reclaimed, reforged, and made stronger. Fadeshear has passed through many hands before yours. Now it is your turn to make the demons of the Fade pay for crossing the veil into the waking world. Whew. Boots of the Frozen Wastes. Temperatures in the frozen wastes can become perilously cold. The barbarians that live there favor boots like these to protect against frostbite. The barbarians, who are generally hospitable and friendly, often present these as gifts to travelers. Hindsight. There are more famous swords than you can count. There are helms beyond numbering, and there are breastplates, daggers, and even mystical footwear that roll immediately off the tongue. There are storied rings, gloves, and even bags invoked around a camp's common fire. But belts? There are very few noteworthy belts. And it was here that the dwarf Thowlid Hammerspur decided he would make his mark. Here, he thought, between the tunic and the trousers, I will stake my claim. He was familiar with the state of the art, of course, as an artificer making a name for himself in Orzammar. He had access to the typically robust record-keeping of the forges. He knew of the drunkard cinch and the pouch paw, but there was no poetry to them, no lineage. They were parlor tricks, the domain of hawkers and pawns. He wanted a belt whose buckle gleamed with purpose, but what purpose? He worked on it from time to time, waiting for inspiration to strike. In the meantime, he needed something to keep his pants above the knee, and though he might as well wear it. In the meantime, he needed something to keep his pants above the knee, and though he might as well wear the damn thing. I guess it's supposed to be thought. And so he did, and so he did until after an especially memorable night at Tapster's Tavern, he managed to fall into his own forge. Shoveling out his remains, they found among the grey ashes his belt, somehow mercifully preserved. Hindsight is a belt possessed of a strange, slow intellect. Whatever would have killed the wearer does, and at that very moment the belt develops a resistance that would have saved its owner. No one knows how Thowlid managed this, and at this point it would be difficult to ask him. When the belt is held in the light just so, the leather reveals a grisly catalogue etched in glinting lyrium. Thowlid Hammerspur, fire. Gorgut the Wizened, poison. Villarak, stabbed 43 times. Halieth Baronet, witches. Went on like this for many years until it fell into your possession. Your temporary possession. The irons. Fashioned from the black steel of Kirkwall's infamous iron foundries, miners' safety harnesses such as this one have protected their hardy wearers since the days when the Tevinter Imperium last claimed the City of Chains. Sir Isaac's armor. The chilling tales of Sir Isaac of Clark are the favorite of bards performing in the wee hours of the night. In dank taverns throughout Thedas, these horror-filled stories captivate listeners and bring nightmares to those faint of heart. Ivo Family Crest. Evolving over the years, the crest of House Ivo has become much more innate than Paragon Ivo's original design. This ancient golden amulet bears the original crest. Though the engravings are simple, the stark lines are somehow deeply stirring. The Lion of Orlais. At the height of the summer war, all of Orlais was embroiled in fierce battles. Over the course of the war, dozens of contenders for the imperial throne emerged, most long forgotten except as footnotes in scholarly tomes. But everyone remembers the gallant young Lord Emile Devereux, the Golden Prince. Thought outnumbered at every turn, he racked victory upon victory, culminating in the 7th Battle of Roses. While wearing this shield, he broke through his uncle's vanguard to win the day. He never knew the taste of defeat, instead meeting his end at the hands of a jealous lover in the dead of night. Of Things Not Lost. Written by a Ferelden refugee as she fled the Blight, this book of poems describes her struggle to preserve her past and cling to the few physical mementos she brought with her into foreign lands. Readers will surely find this book enchanting. Lothering's Lament. Written by a Ferelden refugee as she fled the Blight, this book of poems contains touching reminiscences of all she had to leave behind. Readers will surely benefit from her experience. Staff of Parthalan. Staff of Parthalan. During the Exalted March, the Tevinter Imperium was in chaos. Magister Parthalan and 2 high-ranking magisters were sent to Kirkwall to put down the slave uprising before it spread to the entire empire. However, their legion never arrived at Kirkwall. No one knows what happened to the party, Magister Parthalan, or his fabled staff. Longbow of the Avars. We investigated the area as per your instruction. It seems when Warden Fiona is correct. It was once a dwarven fortress that one of our scouts called Kul Baras. Regardless, it has fallen to ruin and the taint now. Despite Fiona's description, there was no darkspawn to be found. If they were ever present, they have since moved on, which, if you ask me, seems highly unlikely. Her tales of this darkspawn who speaks must be a product of a fevered imagination. There are no signs of a library in the fortress, nor any inclination that the Grey Wardens or King Merrick were there at all. One of my men did, however, find something in the section of the deep roads not far away, a longbow of Avar origin, amid darkspawn corpses, the age being hard to judge considering how the creatures deteriorate. I suspect the blow belonged to Kel ap Morgan, the warden who sacrificed himself to facilitate Fiona's escape. If so, he put up an impressive fight. We found no evidence of his body, sadly. I shall send the bow to you in Weishaupt. From a letter found on the body of a courier killed by bandits in the Anderfells in 920 Dragon. Bard's Honor. A curious thing, Perrin. I found the axe among Kaelin's belongings, wrapped in damask cloth, and initially I thought it might be another gift from that Orlesian harlot. It was a pretty enough thing, and the markings on the blade certainly seemed imperial. I even went so far as to confront Kaelin with it, and do you know what he said? The axe was of personal importance to his father. So why wasn't it buried with his ashes, I asked. Because my mother wouldn't have approved. I wondered if he was lying, but Kaelin's terrible at it. I did some digging, and are you aware there was an elven woman seen in Merrick's company shortly before the Battle of Riverdane? There was a rumor, I understand, that they were lovers, and that she was a bard. Was Merrick being blackmailed? I wonder if this has anything to do with that mysterious bequeathment to those elven families in Orlais. Of course, I had Kaelin dispose of the axe immediately. From a letter written by Queen Honora of Ferelden, 927 Dragon. Arms of the Riverdane. The Battle of Riverdane is among the most famous in Ferelden's history, fought at the onset of the Dragon Age in a bid to secure the country's independence from Orlesian rule. The Ferelden army was cobbled together from commoners and bands who turned against the Orlesian usurper King Meghren. Even so, under the leadership of Logain Mac Tir, they scored an astounding victory against a large force of chevaliers found fording the Riverdane. Blech. Afterwards, Logain was hailed as Ferelden legend, and for a time, veterans of battle enjoyed their Afterwards, Logain was hailed as a Ferelden legend, and for a time, veterans of the battle enjoyed similar status. The soldiers' possessions became prized mementos, in particular the suits of armor belonging to those early supporters who joined Merrick after the death of his mother Moira, the rebel queen. Folktales suggest that the Maker's blessing lives on in the armor those brave allies wore that fateful day. Fiona. Duncan became Ferelden's commander of the Grey in 910 Dragon, assuming the mantle from Commander Pollara, under whom he had served since the Order's restoration in Ferelden. Pollara, who hailed from Antiva, had built an amiable relationship with King Kaelin. She overcame many of the objections of Terin Logain, who argued strenuously against the Order returning. After all, the Wardens had attempted to overthrow the Ferelden throne centuries before. When Pollara disappeared, perhaps recalled to Weishaupt, although none in Ferelden saw her leave, nor have seen her since, Duncan bequeathed to her son a silverite axe of great value. Duncan said he had wielded it and a twin in younger days, back when he had been a far different man. He'd named the axe Fiona, after a warden who inspired him, and suggested that the son take similar inspiration from his mother. It's unknown what became of Pollara's son, other than that he fled Ferelden during the same blight in which Duncan perished. Fiona. Hers is a name that keeps popping up everywhere. Pardon me while I take another drink. Arms of Mac Tir. Terin Logain Mac Tir was not born a nobleman. It's said his family descended from freeholders in the western Banorn, a region known as Oswin. His father, Gareth, would have had no surname of his own. He likely would have described himself as of Oswin, or Banashwin, as the region would have been known in the old tongue. The name Mac Tir means son of the land. It was bestowed upon Logain by King Merrick after the Battle of Riverdane. Ferelden people consider the name highly appropriate. To them, Terin Logain was the son of the entire nation, and he was famously said to have told a crowd that Ferelden would forever be part of his blood. After Logain's betrayal of King Kaelin at Ostagar in 930 Dragon, the general became as reviled as he had once been revered. His manse in Gwarin was looted and many of his personal possessions stolen, among them the armor he wore at the Battle of Riverdane. That armor is said to have had special significance to the man. One peculiarity of the armor was a square of red silk pinned to one of the shoulder belts, for luck, Logain once explained. King Merrick's Helm. King Mac Tir, widely regarded as a hero by the Ferelden people for liberating the country from Orlesian rule, disappeared at sea while en route to Wycombe in 925 Dragon. He was to attend a gathering of the Marcher Lords in an attempt to forge a union in the north, and when he failed to appear, the Free Marches fell back into the petty squabbling that they are infamous for. Terin Logain spent almost 2 years searching for his lost friend, consuming much of the royal treasury and the majority of the Ferelden navy. The search was futile, and when Logain claimed that Orlais had purposefully sunk King Merrick's vessel in order to prevent Marcher unity, he was called off by his daughter, Queen Enora, and a united Banorn. It was time to mourn the king, they said, and so, in 927, a massive state funeral was held in Denerim's chantry. To this day, rumors insist that Marek is still alive, perhaps held in an Orlesian prison somewhere. The lasting mystique has increased the value of his personal possessions, leading to the theft of several artifacts from the royal palace. Among these was the helmet said to have been worn by a young Marek at the disastrous Battle of West Hill. The Black Fox's Jerkin. During the merriest part of the night in any tavern in the lands, the odds are good that you'll hear one of the many tales of the Black Fox. A scoundrel and a hero, the Black Fox's misadventures took him and his band throughout Thedas. He's blamed for many thefts, a few murders, a revolution, and almost a kingdom-wide civil war, but every one of his deeds were designed to thwart tyranny and oppression. The final tale of the Black Fox tells of him and his band searching for the sunken city of the elves deep in the forests of Arlathan, where he parted with his jerkin in a less than voluntary manner. I can't help but wonder if the devs took the tales of the Black Fox from Zorro, which means fox in Spanish, and he wore all black. I don't think anybody actually remembers Zorro. Maybe the Zorro movies with Antonio Banderas. Again, that was back in the 90s. Anyway, Hood's message to the king. He wields a rebel's bow, strung tight against heartwood strained too far. It's a tension that can't last, but it doesn't have to, for the cause must be won or lost while passions still burn. It's a powerful template for revolution, repeated many times across the free marches, but was it born on a battlefield or in rhetoric? The message for the king is where the stories usually diverge. Sometimes it's a plea for liberty taken to a tyrant's heart by the point of an arrow. More often, it's carried in the clatter of sacrifice as weapons fall to a courtyard's cobbles. It depends on the audience. The young like their victories sudden and violent, while the old prefer something more cautionary. It may be that Hood is not so much a person as a tactic, ushered to far horizons with the grave's embrace in order to protect conspirators. After all, how many deaths can he claim when one is the typical limit for a common man? But the tales return time and again, across leagues and centuries. At a certain point, one hopes the name is symbolic, because allying with such a power would bring its own problems and debts. From Rebels of the Marches, Allegory and Rebellion, forward by Philium, a bard. Jarvia's Shank. When the Carter crime boss, Berat, fell, his lover, Jarvia, fought off rivals, planting this shank in each of their hearts before she emerged as the group's undisputed leader. For years, Jarvia used a mix of brutality, cunning, and blackmail to grow the Carter's power until it threatened the Diamond Quarter itself. When King Endrin Idukan died, someone whispered that Jarvia planned to force the Assembly to recognize the rights of Dusters in Orzammar. Others said she planned to overthrow the nobles entirely. The truth will never be known, though. She was killed in cold blood by the hero of Ferelden. That's right. The Lion's Claws. Foiled at every turn by the infamous outlaw, Lady Rosamund, the ever-persistent Tyrion Loghain fielded an army to chase the bandit through the Korcari Wilds. Eventually, she was captured near Barchamp. Bound, gagged, and in chains, she still managed to escape on the first night using thieves' tools concealed in these gloves. To this day, there is an unclaimed bounty on her head of 1,000 sovereigns. The Rascal's Scale by Coinheart. Strangest suit I ever made? The scale for that fool rascal. No second thought needed. A project I wanted to try for years, obvious given my name, right? But I could never find a fool to wear his wealth as protection. This one, though, was daft as any surfacer, and was paying 2 coins for each that I hammered, and that buys a smile and a nod for any idiot, I guess. For any idiot. I guess he's something of a name in his own lands, this rascal, so I can't really question, and I did him my best, like always. Damned lyrium weave left my fingers numb, though. No sword will get through that, I guarantee, but I'll bet his children are born pale. From Tales of the Craft, Masters in Their Own Words, a record of the Dwarven Smithwork Guild archived. The Archon's Blades. The Archon Guard of Hissarian are vilified throughout the lands. The chant depicts their cruel treatment of Andraste as one of the reasons the Maker turned his gaze from his creations. After Hissarian converted to Andraste's teaching, he disbanded his guard and stripped them of their arms. Most of the guard's swords were destroyed, but a handful of the Archon's blades are still around. Perhaps one of the blades here drew the prophet's blood, as the Archon interrogated Andraste before her execution. Beregrand the Bold. Beregrand the Bold was either a hero or a traitor, depending on how you look at it. Before exile was common among the dwarves, only the most heinous crimes warranted a dwarf being stripped of house and sent to the surface. Beregrand qualified and was banished on accusations of regicide after killing a dwarven king on the Proving Sands. Beregrand spat on the assembly that pronounced his sentence before strapping on his armor and leaving Gundar. Living on the surface, Beregrand's incredible fighting skills, tactical knowledge, and intellect built a naval empire centered in what would one day be Antiva. His more enduring legacy was teaching human smiths, engineers, and other crafters jealously guarded dwarven secrets. Cursed by dwarves and hailed by humans, Beregrand became a figure of much controversy. As complicated as his life was, the story of Beregrand's armor is even more checkered. His armor has passed through many heroes' hands over the centuries. Despite the advantages it gave them, no hero ever survived using it. No hero using it ever survived to old age. Sorry. The Edge of Night. You've never seen a lad so taken with an axe. He carried one of the old sodded things with him wherever he went. Practicing day and night, he drove his mother to distraction, he did. Even when he was fully raised into the warrior caste, he refused proper weapons. Said he had the feel of an axe, and that's all he needed. Over the years, he spent a small fortune having smiths layer enchantments on him. Oh, how others would sneer at those ancient things. Well, they did, until Beregrand lopped off the King Jegreth's head on the sand. Sad business, that, and Gundar was poorer for it. And I'm not just talking about the king. From the Memories of Gundar, a collection of stories preserved by the Shaperate of the Lost Dwarven Kingdom. The Empress's Point. As one of the early rulers of contemporary Orlais, Empress Genevieve I created many of the traditions and practices of the imperial court. She employed the bravest and most skilled swordsman to her guard, the Empress's arm, one of the main predecessors of the Chevaliers. Her guards were given a princely gift, an enchanted Tevinter blade. These blades were named for the Empress's darker side. When rivals overstepped their bounds, Genevieve was always quick to make them see her point. The Golden Prince's Revenant. Tales of Emile Devereux flourish amongst the Orlesian peasants. The dashing Golden Prince was a populist who raised a huge army from his common subjects by promising reform for the aging empire. Although he never won his imperial coronet, Lord Emile captured the hearts and minds of generations of Orlesian dreamers while wearing this golden armor. It is said that, as a young girl, even Empress Celeste was captivated by his stories. The Ashen Cuirass. Cuirass? Sorry, how is this word pronounced? Because I've only ever seen it in video games. I've never actually heard it pronounced.
Cuirass.
Cuirass. Cuirass. Got it. Thank you. The Ashen Cuirass. The charge of the Ash Warriors is a sight to behold. With hounds at their side and their fierce battle cries, the Ash Warriors have buckled the ranks of even stalwart veterans. And if the army line does hold, then the true test begins. Quill and ink is a poor medium to convey the sheer power of their rages. Despite the Ash Warriors' renown, several misconceptions persist. Some believe the mercenaries are predominantly Avar or chastened tribesmen. Certainly their armor evokes barbarian roots, but the men and women of the Ash Warriors are almost entirely civilized. In my travels as chronicler and surgeon, I spent several months with the Ash Warriors, although finding any willing to speak of their history was difficult. The story I gradually elicited were chilling tales of hard men. One was an arsonist who joined the Ash Warriors on the gallows, another had committed fratricide, and another's dire past I dare not recount. In joining the Ash Warriors, their crimes were forgiven, for it was as if they were never born. Even in legal records, their old life is erased. Contracts voided, marriages annulled, records of birth erased. In this, they are much like the Dwarven Legion of the Dead. Their new lives are dedicated to redemption and service. My first night with the band, I was startled when they asked me to sing a few verses from the Chant of Light. Grim to a man and fearsomely garbed, yet they were as eager to hear the chant as the most faithful parishioner. I felt as the first missionaries must have, surrounded by barbarians. The more I learned of the Ash Warriors, the more questions I had. They are mercenaries who demand no pay, men with no pasts, considered the king's men, yet beholden to no one. I could have traveled with them for many years and still had mysteries to uncover. From the Annals of the Scarlet March by Brother Bedine, Chantry Scholar. The Dogs of War. And then Velcorminth swung his mighty hammer. The blow tore the Alamari band's head clean off. He lay crumpled beneath the war leader, and Velcorminth did shout, "You canine lovers, you who think you can defeat me, stand before me and my dogs. They are the dogs of war." He planted his blood-soaked hammer in the earth, and his enemies did quiver. But victory would not go to the chastened that day, for Hafter approached and intoned, "I am Hafter, the slayer of Darkspawn, leader of the Alamari. No dog nor wolf alive frightens me." And so they traded blows for 3 days and 3 nights. Bruised, bloodied, and tired they grew. It was after 1,000 blows that Hafter's blade, Usaris, found Velcorminth's heart. Then Hafter spoke, "I banish the chastened from these plains. I have taken the greatest of your men from you and claimed his weapon as my own. If ever you rise against me or my sons, we will take more than that." And so, to this very day, the chastened never venture far from their wilds, and the children of Hafter still hold our lands free. From Tales of the Alamari, author unknown. Halberg of Gelgned. Halberg of Gelgnig the Faithful. Gelgnig. Halberg of Gelgnig the Faithful. Not all of the Alamari tribes flocked to Andraste. Especially on the borders of the Korcari Wilds, her words found scant purchase. Decades after her death, many Alamari held true to the gods of their ancestors. Missionaries braved these hard lands only to become martyrs of the faith. And so it was until the Alamari were embroiled in a bitter war for survival against the Chasens and Avars, when the leader of the Ash Warriors, Gelgnig, received a vision of Andraste. The charismatic barbarian traveled throughout Ferelden, telling his tale and unifying the factitious bands around the word of the Maker. The Ash Warriors ever since have been fervent in their faith to the Maker. To the Ash Warriors, Gilgnig's armor is a religious artifact, but it was lost in the Navarran campaign of 869 Blessed. The Mountain Father's Haft. The Frostbacks run red with barbarian blood. We found their sacred caves and claimed their most holy relics. When the soldiers came out of the mountain cave to brandish this weapon, the Avars rose up in a mighty furor. We had to put down every man, woman, and child. It was as if they'd gone rabid. Before they perished, their woman pronounced a curse so vile and treasonous 3 soldiers had to be whipped to re-establish discipline. Our guide says this axe is a sacred weapon, a weapon of the gods. We plan to march further into the mountains to defeat the last of the tribes. Surely there cannot be more than 1,000 left. I have every confidence that by next spring these barbarians will plague us no more. Then we can turn our attention fully to the Chastened and Alamari. Although this axe may look crude, I assure you that it is of enormous importance to these backwards people. Consider it the first spoils of many. Last letter to Magister Talario from the first Tevinter expedition against the Abars. 483 TE. Classy. Willem's Bulwark. From the fair and deadly Lady Shayna to his faithful squire Sir Tillers, much is known about the companions of Calenhad, the first king of united Ferelden, but seldom do bards recount the tales of William Halfir and the Ash Warriors. Willem Halfir and the Ash Warriors. While noble Calenhad was trying to assemble a nation, he found himself greatly outnumbered by Tyrn Simeon's fort. Is it Simeon? Simone? I've been saying it wrong the whole time. I'm gonna go with Simone. Because Simeon is just weird. By Tyrn Simone's forces. It seemed a foregone conclusion that Calenhad would fall, but on the advice of Aldenon the Wise, Calenhad ventured deep into the Brazilian forest in search of allies. Those woods have a fearsome reputation, and after a fortnight of waiting for their liege to re-emerge, his men lost hope. Then Calenhad returned, with Willem Halfir by his side, and the Ash Warriors behind him. Although the Ash Warriors' numbers were relatively few, they turned the tide of the Battle of the White Valley. Halfir and his men breached the enemy's van, allowing Calenhad and Lady Shayna to kill Tyrn Simone and unite the land. Sitting at the Ash Warriors' campfire, listening to them tell of the prowess of Willem Halfir, it has become clear to me that his role in the formation of our kingdom is greatly underestimated. From the Annals of the Scarlet March, by Brother Badine, Chantry Scholar. Oof. Places. The Anderfels. The Anderfels are a land of shocking extremes. It is the most desolate place in all the world, for 2 blights have left great expanses of the steppes so completely devoid of life that corpses cannot even decay there. No insect or grub will ever reach them. It is a land filled with wonders like the Meridain, with its gigantic white statue of Our Lady carved into its face, her hands outstretched and bearing an eternal flame, or Weishaupt Fortress with its walls of living rock towering over the desolate plains below. The Anders, too, are a people of extremes, the most devout priests and the most deadly soldiers, the poorest nation in the world and the most feared. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, Travels of a Chantry Scholar, by Brother Genetivi. Kirkwall, the Elven Alienage. Lowtown is home to a squalid elven alienage. Here, like in most Thedas alienages, elves are packed into tiny, run-down apartments and effectively segregated from the human population. Kirkwall's alienage is even more dilapidated than the rest of Lowtown, but the elves go to great lengths in keeping the place looking bright and festive. The Venedal, Tree of the People, standing in the middle of the alienage as a symbol for elven pride and shared cultural identity, and it is lovingly cared for. It's difficult to say if the elves would continue confining themselves to the alienage if they were given the chance to mingle. They may not admit to it, but some feel that living among their kind is far better than living with humans, no matter how terrible alienage life may be. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetivi. Kirkwall, Darktown. Darktown was once a mine controlled by the Tevinter Imperium. Once exhausted, the mine shafts were extended under the city to dispose of sewage from Kirkwall's overcrowded population of slaves. And unsurprisingly, the tunnels became a refuge for those fleeing captivity. A similar trend continues today. The Undercity, as some call it, is home to the diseased, the insane, to criminals, and even the dead. Unwanted corpses are often discarded here by murderers and lazy undertakers. That explains that. Darktown slums makes Lowtown look pleasant in comparison. The foul miasma known as choke damp clogs and swells in every corner of the Darktown, creating a poisonous mist. Its sewers are a dangerous place. The walls are damp, slick, and coated with phosphorescent lichen. The sewer is a maze, and one foolish enough to enter is not likely to be heard from again. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetivi. Kirkwall, the Gallows. Statues of tortured slaves fill the gallows courtyards, a ghastly memento of Kirkwall's history. 1,500 years ago, Kirkwall was the Tevinter Imperium's largest quarry, feeding the construction of the Imperial Highway. The Imperium's hunger for expansion led to legions of slaves forced into working the quarry. When the Empire's construction phase ended, Kirkwall slid naturally into its new role as the capital of the slave trade, the gallows at its heart. The statues are not monuments to the suffering of slaves. Every inch and angle of the courtyard was designed by magisters bent on breaking the spirit of newcomers. Executions here took place daily, sometimes hourly, and corpses were hung from gibbets throughout the yard. New slaves trudging in from the docks saw what awaited them. When Our Lady turned her arms against the Imperium, the slaves of Kirkwall revolted and claimed the city for themselves. The gallows stood empty for 200 years, not to be reopened until the crowning of Divine Justinia I. The gallows transformed the city again when the abandoned prison tower became the home of Kirkwall's Circle. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetivi. Kirkwall, Hightown. At the height of the Tevinter Imperium slave trade, Kirkwall's elite prospered beyond dreams of avarice. Hightown was built for the wealthiest slavers, its glitzy mansions rising atop the great wall of rock that borders on one side the waking sea. Lowtown cowered on its other side until Kirkwall's slaves rose to plunder and destroy Hightown's riches. Today, Hightown's prominent buildings are the Keep, home to the ruling Viscount, and the Chantry, home to the Grand Cleric and the city's religious center. Both are converted estates that once housed wealthy magisters, rebuilt and converted after the uprising. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetivi. Kirkwall, Lowtown. Lowtown sits in a massive cauldron-shaped pit that was once Kirkwall's first quarry. The district was constructed by slaves who carved the city and its harbor out of the rock. Today, Lowtown is a labyrinth of shantytowns, corridors, and hexagonal courtyards, hexes in the local parlance. Lowtown's poorest live in caves hewn out of the cliff face. The district is shoddily built and bears scars caused by the collapsing walls. Foundry smoke smothers the area. Only a cold winter storm clears the air, but the icy wind howling over the mouths of old mine shafts hardly counts as a relief. Occasionally, these Darktown shafts erupt with gouts of foul air known as choke damp. It's not uncommon to find whole slums silently suffocated, frozen in the midst of everyday activity. The walls surrounding Lowtown are highest by the harbor. Its busiest streets leads up to Hightown, where the wealthiest Kirkwallers perch. When one stands in Lowtown, all one sees, other than the rocky walls, is Hightown. It glitters overhead, always in sight, yet always beyond reach. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar, by Brother Genetivi. Pardon me. The City of Kirkwall. Kirkwall once lived on the edge of the Tevinter Imperium and was home to nearly 1 million slaves. Stolen from elven lands or shipped from across the sea, all slaves fed the Imperium's unquenchable thirst for expansion. They worked in massive quarries and sweltering foundries that produced stone and steel for the Empire. The city's complicated past is not easy to forget, history having earmarked many corners of the stone city. A ship approaching the harbor spots the city's namesake, an imposing black wall. It is visible for miles, and carved into the cliffs are the pantheon of the vile guardians representing the old gods. Over the years, the Chantry has effaced many of these profane sentinels, but it will take many more years to erase them all. Also carved into the cliff is a channel that permits ships into the city's interior. Flanking the channel are 2 massive bronze statues, the twins of Kirkwall. The statues have a practical use. Kirkwall sits next to the narrowest point of the waking sea, and a massive chain net can be erected between the statues and the lighthouse, closing off the only narrow navigable lane. The stranglehold on sea traffic is jealously guarded by the ever-changing rulers of the city, as the net trolls taxes, tolls, and extortions from the sea. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar, by Brother Genetivi. The Orlesian Empire. There are many lords and ladies in Val Royeaux, and I mean this literally. Once the system of noble titles in Orlais was labyrinthine. There were barons and barons and baronets and sub-barons and a horde of others, each with its own origins and its own nuance of comparison. The Orlesian aristocracy is ancient and much given to competition. All the nobility play in the grand game, as it is known, whether they wish to or not. It is a game of reputation and patronage, where moves are made with rumors and scandal is the chief weapon. No gentle game, this. More blood has been drawn as a result of the grand game than any war the Orlesians have fought. Of this I am assured by almost every gentleman here. As far as titles went, everything changed with the coming of Emperor Drakon, who established the Orlesian Empire as it exists now, and who created the Chantry. There is no more venerated figure in Orlais. In Val Royeaux, the statue of Drakon stands as tall as the statue of Andraste. Drakon determined that the grand game was a tearing Orlais apart, so he abolished all titles beside his own and lord and lady. I am told with some twittering amusement that this action did not end the grand game as Drakon had intended. Now the lords and ladies collected unofficial titles rather than official ones, such as the Exalted Patron of Tassius Clay, or Uncle to the Champion of Tremis. It is a headache to remember such titles, and one winces to think of the poor doorman at the ball who must rattle them off as each guest enters the room. The aristocracy is different from Ferelden in other ways as well. The Orlesians' right to rule stems directly from the Maker. There exists neither the concept of rule by merit nor the slightest notion of rebellion. If one is not noble, one aspires to be, or at least aspires to be in the good graces of a noble, and is ever watching for a way to enter the patronage of those better placed in the grand game. And then there are the masks and the cosmetics. I have not seen so much paint since the kennels at Highever, but that is another story. From Beyond the Frostpacks by Ban Tarek of Westhill, 920 Dragon. Parvalan, the occupied north. In the 30th year of the Steel Age, the first Qunari ships were sighted off the coast of Parvalan in the far north, marking the beginning of a new age of warfare. History calls this the First Qunari War, but it was mostly a one-sided bloodbath, with the Qunari advancing far into the mainland. Qunari warriors in glittering steel armor carved through armies with ease. Their cannons, the likes of which our ancestors had never seen, reduced city walls to rubble in a matter of seconds. Stories of Qunari occupation vary greatly. It is said they dismantled families and sent captives to learning camps for indoctrination into their religion. Those who refused to cooperate disappeared into mines or construction camps. Shows where my mind is at. For every tale of suffering, however, there is another of enlightenment deriving from something called the Qun. This is either a philosophical code or a written text that governs all aspect of Qunari life, perhaps both. One converted Saharan reported pity for those who refused to embrace the Qun, as if the conquerors had led him to some sort of self-discovery. For all my life I followed the Maker wherever his path led me, he wrote, but in the Qun I have found the means to travel my own path. It has been said that the most complete way to wipe out a people is not with blades, but with books. Thankfully, a world that had repelled 4 blights would not easily bow to a foreign aggressor, and so the exalted marches began. The greatest advantage of the Chantry-led forces was the Circle of Magi. For all their technology, the Qunari appeared to harbor great hatred for magic. Faced with cannons, the Chantry responded with lightning and balls of fire. The Qunari armies lacked the sheer numbers of humanity. So many were slain at Murnaspel on both sides that the Vale is said to be permanently sundered, the ruins still plagued by restless corpses. But each year the Chantry pushed further and further into Qunari lines, although local converts to the Qun proved difficult to return to Andraste's teachings. By the end of the Storm Age, the Qunari were truly pushed back. Ravain was the only human land that retained the Qunari religion after being freed, and its rulers attempted to barter a peace. Most human lands signed the Lomerin Accord, accepting the Tevinter Imperium. It is a shaky peace that has lasted to this day. From the Exalted Marches, an examination of Chantry warfare by Sister Petrine, Chantry scholar. Ravain. Nowhere in my travels, not in the heart of the Imperium, nor the streets of Orzammar, have I felt so much an outsider as in Ravain. The chant of light never truly reached the ears of these people. The years they spent under the thumb of the Qunari left most of the country zealous followers of the Qun, but resistance to the chant goes deeper than the Qunari War. The Ravaini refuse to be parted from their seers, wise women who are in fact hedge mages, communicating with spirits and actually allowing themselves to become possessed. The Chantry prohibition against such magical practices violates millennia of local tradition. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genda TV. The City of Starkhaven. Starkhaven, the largest city in the Free Marches, sits on the bank of the great Mananta River. I remember my visit to the city quite clearly. I was taken up by the river by barge, a cumbersome vessel that moved at a stately pace, and disembarked by the city's central square, an impressive space with marble fountains and surrounded by kingly estates. Starkhaven's wealth was truly a sight to behold. A path paved in granite led up to the grandest building I'd ever seen. My guide indicated that was the residence of Starkhaven's ruler, Prince Vale. We supped at the table of my guide's closest friend. I was presented with a variety of dishes from the region. One in particular stood out: fish and egg pie, Starkhaven's most famous dish. The 3 deboned fish caught just that day were cooked in a porcelain vessel with boiled eggs, dried fruit, spices, and thickened cream, all topped with a light crust. Superb! From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genda TV. Sundermount. Kirkwall is guarded by mountains to its north, the tallest of which is Sundermount. The mountain has a fearsome reputation. Legend says that it was the site of the final battle between the Tevinter Imperium of old and the ancient empire of elves that perished with Arlathan. Both sides unleashed horrors into the waking world, and fade creatures prowl the heights to this very day, unaware that the war for which they were summoned is long since over. There is a tale in the Free Marches that blessed Andraste, upon reaching Kirkwall with her armies, sojourned up the slopes of Sundermount alone. She stayed there for 3 days. When she returned, she wept as if her heart were broken. I stayed 2 months in Kirkwall, and despite my best efforts, I never found a guide willing to take me up the mountain. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar, by Brother Genetivi. The Tevinter Imperium. For good or ill, the Imperium has put its stamp on Thedas forever. The old Imperial Highway is still in use across most of Thedas. The ruins of Tevinter fortresses and centers of magical study still litter our landscape, long after the glory of the Imperium dimmed. But the influence of that ancient empire goes deeper than this. Without Tevinter, there would have been no Blights, no Andraste, no Chantry. Every aspect of our world would be altered. The might and majesty of the Imperium may have faded, but it still makes its presence known, even in the most distant corners of Thedas. Every child has been brought up on stories of Tevinter as it is now, a decadent nation ruled by the Archon and his court of magisters, great and no doubt corrupt mage lords. Their chantry is a mockery of our own, their black divine, a man chosen from the ranks of the Minrathous circle of magi. The Maker's most hallowed law, magic exists to serve man, and never to rule over him, perverted. Mages in the Imperium say their most sacred duty is to serve man, and they serve best by wielding political power. And the worst, that which blessed Andraste must weep to see, all of it built on a foundation of slavery. While most nations forbid the buying and selling of slaves within their own borders, nearly everyone ships her people to the Imperium for sale, skirting the prohibitions against such atrocities and feeding the Imperium's endless hunger for bodies. To fight the Korcari, to work the mines and quarries, to build the palaces of the magisters, to sweep the crumbling streets and turn the middens and serve at the whim of their mage overseers. From Black City, Black Divine, a study of the Tevinter Imperium by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. Geography of Thedas. Thedas is bounded to the east by the Amaranthine Ocean, to the west by the Tirishan Forest and the Hunterhorn Mountains, to the south by the snowy wastes that lie beyond the Orkney Mountains, and to the north by the Dornak Forest. The word Thedas is Tevinter in origin, originally used to refer to the lands that bordered the Imperium. As the Imperium lost its stranglehold on the conquered nations, more and more lands became Thedas, until finally people applied the name to the entire continent. The northern part of Thedas is divided amongst the Anderfels, the Tevinter Imperium, Antiva, and Ravane, with the islands held by the Korcari just off the coast. Central Thedas consists of the Free Marches, Navarra, and Orlais, with Ferelden to the south. What lies beyond the snowy wastes is a mystery. The freezing temperatures and barren land have kept even the most intemperate cartographers at bay. Similarly, the western reaches of the Anderfels have never been fully explored, even by the Anders themselves. We do not know if the dry steppes are shadowed by mountains, or if they extend all the way to a nameless sea. There must be other lands, continents, or islands, perhaps across the Amaranthine or north of Parvalin, for the Korcari arrived in Thedas from somewhere. But beyond that beyond that deduction, we know nothing. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar, by Brother Genetivi. In actuality, I'm sure I mentioned this in Origins, but Thedas was actually the in-house term, which is just a shortening for the Dragon Age setting, which I think is very clever. Good job, BioWare. The Korcari Wilds. It is said that in the midst of the Black Age, when werewolves stalked the lands of Ferelden in numbers that kept every farmholder indoors and a hound on every doorstep, a powerful Arl of the Alamari people stood and declared that he would put an end to the threat. His Arling stood on the border of the dark forest on the southern border of the Ferelden Valley. 1 second. His Arling stood on the border of the dark forest on the southern border of the Ferelden Valley, and he claimed that the werewolves used the forest to launch their midnight assaults on humanity. For 20 years, this Arl led an army of warriors and hounds deep into the forest. In his hunt for the werewolves, he slew not only every wolf he came upon, but also every member of the chastened wilder folk. Any one of them, he said, could harbor a demon inside and thus be a werewolf in disguise. For 20 years, the forests rang with scream, and the rivers ran red. The tales say that an old chastened woman found her sons all dead at the Arl's blades. She pulled one of those very blades from one son's heart and plunged it into her own chest, cursing the Arl's name as she did so. Where her blood touched the ground, a mist began to rise. It spread and spread until it was everywhere in the forest. The Arl's army became lost, and it is said they died there. Others say they wander still. The ruins of his Arling stand to this day, filled with the ghosts of women waiting eternally for their husbands to return. The forest of the legend is, of course, the Korcari Wilds. There are as many legends about the great southern forest as there are shadows, or so the saying goes. The chastened wilder folk have made their home there since mankind first came to these lands, and the wildlands spread as far into the south as anyone has ventured. Beyond the mists are vast tracts of snow, white-capped mountains, and entire fields of ice. It is a land too cold for mankind to survive, yet the chastened eke out an existence even there, and they tell of horrors beyond the wilds that the lowland folk could not begin to comprehend. To most, Ferelden simply ends with the Korcari Wilds. There is nothing beyond. The wilds is a land of great trees, wet marshes, and dangerous monsters. What more need be said? From the Land of the Wilders by Mother Aelis. Chantry Scholar, 918 Dragon. The Wounded Coast. One of the few roads leading into Kirkwall passes through a dangerous area known as the Wounded Coast. The road winds close to the cliff edge that looms over waters with many a precipitous drop to the churning waves below. There is many a local legend involving travelers falling or jumping or having been flung from those heights. From the cliffs, the road leads through jagged hills that line the pass like sharp teeth. Bandits use these hills as cover from which to ambush caravans. There's more to fear here than bandits, of course. Once one leaves the hills, you come upon a maze of sharp canyons, the hunting grounds for many fierce creatures. It is a place of secrets dating back to the golden age of the Tevinter Imperium, where ancient relics and statues crumble in time with the rocks. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetivi. Ooh. This is getting long already? Ah, here it is. I won't read The Art of War, but I think I am actually going to put the second half. I'm going to split this episode in two, as we are already at an hour and a half on my timer. So I will see you in part 2. of this episode. I'm really sorry. I should not have waited so long to do one of these. But, in the meantime, I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.